You've probably heard people say that Gen Z is lazy. They have no work ethic. They're not ambitious. They just want to do the bare minimum and get by. Before we start, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more great content. Now, let's begin. These are all things you've probably heard about Generation Z. But are any of these actually true? Are the members of Generation Z actually lazy? Or is this just something that people are saying because they don't understand this generation? A study by Adobe found that Gen Z is the most hardworking generation, with 60% saying that they work more than 40 hours a week. Like we mentioned before, Gen Z is the most entrepreneurial generation, and that's reflected in their side hustles as well. One of the main complaints that people have about Gen Z is that they are not financially literate and that they are unprepared for the future. One of the biggest stereotypes about Gen Z is that they are too busy living in the moment and spending all their money on avocado toast and experiences that they do unsave any money for the future. In fact, Gen Z is actually the complete opposite of lazy. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching. They're ambitious, hardworking, financially literate, and they're investing in their future. So the next time you hear someone say that Gen Z is lazy, just remember that they're the ones who are entering the workforce and becoming financially independent. And while we can't know for sure what the future will hold, based on these statistics, it looks bright for Gen Z, however. This may not be entirely true either, as Gen Z is actually the most likely generation to save money. In fact, a recent survey by Bankrate found that Gen Z saves the highest percentage of their income out of all the generations, with 27% saving 20% or more of their income compared to 21% of millennials, 16% of Generation X, and 10% of boomers. What's even more interesting is that Gen Z is also the most likely generation to have an emergency fund, with 62% saying that they have one, compared to 53% of millennials, 48% of Generation X, and 39% of boomers. So maybe Gen Z is untased lazy when it comes to saving money as people think they are. However, this may not be entirely true, as a recent study by Credit Karma found that Gen Z is actually the most financially literate generation. People have been investing in the stock market for hundreds of years, and it's one of the best ways to grow your wealth over time. However, for a long time, investing has been seen as something that only the wealthy can do. But with the rise of easy-to-use investment apps like Robinhood and Webull, more and more people are getting into the stock market. In fact, a recent survey by Bankrate found that Gen Z is the most likely generation to invest in stocks, with 44% saying that they do, compared to 35% of millennials, 30% of Generation X, and 22% of boomers. What's even more interesting is that Gen Z is also the most likely generation to use a robo-advisor, with 28% saying that they do, compared to 19% of millennials, 15% of Generation X, and 11% of boomers. Robo-advisors are investment managers that use algorithms to manage your portfolio, and they've become very popular in recent years because they are usually much cheaper than traditional investment advisors. In fact, when asked to rank themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, when it comes to financial literacy, Gen Z gave themselves an average score of 7.4 compared to 6.8 for millennials, 6.4 for Generation X, and 5.7 for boomers. Not only that, but Gen Z is also the most confident generation when it comes to managing their finances, with 72% feeling confident compared to 58% of millennials, 54% of Generation X, and 44% of boomers. So maybe Gen Z isn't as financially illiterate as people think they are. According to a recent survey by Bankrate, Gen Z is more likely than other generations to have a side hustle, with 40% having one compared to 30% of millennials, 21% of Generation X, and 12% of boomers. What's even more interesting is that Gen Z is also more likely to monetize their side Hustle with 54%, saying that they do it to make money compared to 41% of millennials, 35% of Generation X, and 29% of boomers. The reason for this is pretty obvious. Gen Z is the first generation that has grown up with the internet and social media, and they were able to use these tools to their advantage to make money. For example, many Gen Zers have built a following on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, and they are able to monetize this following through sponsored posts and affiliate marketing. Not only that, but Gen Z is also the most stressed generation, with 47% citing work as the main source of their stress. However, the good news is that this stress does seem to be affecting their health, as Gen Z is the healthiest generation with 72% of them, saying that they are in excellent health compared to 58% of millennials, 54% of Generation X, and 44% of boomers. So despite the fact that Gen Z works hard, they're also able to maintain a healthy lifestyle, which is definitely not a sign of laziness. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Well, today we look at some stats about Gen Z and their work ethic, and see if they really as lazy as everyone says they are, or if there's more to it than meets the eye. So stay tuned. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you interesting videos about money, business, and investing. But first, who exactly is Generation Z? As of 2022, Generation Z is defined as anyone born between the mid-1990s to the early 2010s. This means that as of right now, the oldest members of Generation Z are 26 years old, and the youngest are 12. And while this may seem surprising, the fact that the oldest members are already in their mid-20s means that they are now entering the workforce and becoming financially independent. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, as of right now, 55% of Gen Z members are working age, meaning that soon they'll be the ones who are contributing to society and being productive members of the economy. But until then, a lot of people have already written them off as lazy and unproductive. So let's take a look at some of the statistics that show that Gen Z is actually far from lazy. No one. They're more likely to be entrepreneurs. According to a recent survey by Go Banking Rates, 37% of Gen Z respondents said that they were interested in starting their own business in the near future. On top of this, 33% of Gen Z members also said that they would prefer to freelance rather than work a traditional job. What's even more interesting is that Gen Z is actually the most entrepreneurial generation since millennials. That's right. Out of all the generations, boomers, millennials, Generation X, Gen Z is the one that wants to start a business the most. And what's driving this trend? Well, according to a survey by McKinsey, Gen Z members want to start a business because they want more flexibility and autonomy over their work lives. And they're also more optimistic about their ability to succeed as an entrepreneur than older generations. In fact, when asked why they wanted to start a business, 43% of Gen Z respondents said that they felt confident that they could succeed, where 32% of millennials, 29% of boomers, and 27% of Generation X said that they felt the same way. The bottom line here is that Gen Z is more entrepreneurial than other generations, and that is not a sign of laziness. It's a sign of ambition. Number 2, they're more ambitious. You've probably heard the stereotype that millennials are lazy and narcissistic, but did you know that they're actually the complete opposite? No. 3, they're more likely to have side hustles. No. 4, they're more financially literate. No. 5, they're more likely to save money. And number 6, they're more likely to invest in the stock market. So is Generation Z lazy? Well, based on these statistics, the answer is no. What do you think? Is Generation Z lazy? Let us know in the comments below.